Good morning, folks. I'm hoping you're doing well today. We have almost contradictory news coming out of the Holy See today. We have Francis defending the unchanging teachings of the church on one thing and acting like a predictable monster on the other. So, the latter story will be my video that goes live 45 minutes from the time I'm broadcasting this live stream. We're going to wait a couple of minutes before we get into the news just to lighten things up a little bit. But the reactions to the news that I'm going to bring you here on the good thing he did has caused the kind of tears that I probably should go to confession for enjoying seeing. That is the heartbreak of Modernists, as one of their big pet projects is not going to come to fruition anytime soon. So sad, but that's what happens when you play this dumb game that they were playing of trying to get the church to adopt more secular thinking and more secular values. So good morning to the people in the chat. I don't know if anybody is there presently. I know we've got 50 people watching, which is good news. So why don't we dive into our story today? Because there won't be a super long stream, I don't think. We'll go to Father Z. This has been reported on fairly mainstream Catholic news sites, but I like Father Z's take on this. He says, Francis, no to women deacons. Francis just destroyed the hopes and dreams of the Modernists on the chances of there being ordination open to anybody the world tells us that we need to have. Good morning to Catherine in the chat and to Dermot. Both of you coming from, Dermot's coming from Ireland and Catherine's coming from the UK. So good morning to you. It is still morning there, I think. You're about, 11 a.m., I believe, over there. Have I seen Tim Gord's commentary on the issue? No, I haven't. I note in my title of this video that the subject is closed for now. This has been brought up every single time through every synod. So I haven't watched anybody else's videos on this. So no, I haven't. And, but this is he just quotes, Father Z quotes CNA on this. So he says, Pope Francis on women deacons, holy orders are reserved for men. Pope Francis reaffirmed the impossibility of women becoming priests or even modern church deacons in an interview for a book released Tuesday in Italy. The question of whether some women in the early church were deaconesses or another kind of collaborator with the bishops is, quote, not irrelevant because holy orders is reserved for men, the Pope said. And Father Z notes this is also reiterated in Vatican II's Lumen Gentium, which affirms that. The Pope's answer to questions about women's roles in the church were included in a book published in June in Spanish as El Pastor, Desafios, Razones y Reflexión sobre su Pontificado. And this was last June, by the way. And here is where Father Z inserts a note of his own. He says, well, wait a cotton picking minute last June, and yet the Walking Together was discussing this. What else did they waste their time on? No, please don't answer that. It's a rhetorical question. And that's a good question. Why did they have this at the Synod? I'm going to reiterate this question over and over again. Francis closed the door on this again in June in an interview. And he has actually been constantly pretty consistent on this, saying you can't have this. This is not something that's going to happen. I've reported that multiple times in the last 5 years that I've been doing this. He has said the same thing over and over and over again. And yet here we go. We'll continue. The book, whose title means in English, The Shepherd, Struggles, Reasons, and Thoughts on His Papacy, was released in Italian on October 24th. The Italian edition, well, there's an Italian title, which has a different title called You Are Not Alone, Challenges, Answers, and Hopes. About the possibility of women deacons, Francis pointed out that the diaconate is, quote, the first degree of holy orders in the Catholic Church, followed by the priesthood and finally the episcopate. He said he formed commissions in 2016 and 2020 to study the question further, after a study in the 1980s by the International Theological Commission established that the role of deaconesses in the early church was, quote, comparable to the benedictions of abbesses, which is true. And this is Father Z's note here saying we have a modern word for what ancient deaconesses were. None. Precisely. Continuing, in response to a question about why he is, quote, against female priesthood, Francis told Argentine journalist Sergio Rubin and Italian journalist Francesca Ambrogetti, the authors of the book, that it is, quote, a theological problem. I think we would undermine the essence of the church if we considered only the priestly ministry, that is, the ministerial way, he said, pointing out that women mirror Jesus' bride in the church. And Father Z notes, as does the human soul. The fact that the woman does not access ministerial life is not a deprivation because her place is much more important, he said. I think we err in our catechesis in explaining these things, and ultimately we fall back on an administrative criterion that does not work in the long run. On the other hand, with respect to the charism of women, I want to say very clearly that from my personal experience, they have a great ecclesial intuition, he said. Asked about women's ordination bringing, quote, more people closer to the church and optional priestly celibacy helping with priest shortages, Pope Francis says he does not share these views. No, he included that with the married priest question. I can't believe I'm actually agreeing with Francis on something 100%, just across the board. Note how he characterizes this too. Well, then we'll stop reading the article. He says, Lutherans ordain women, but still few people go to church, he said. Their priests can marry, but despite that, they can't grow the number of ministers. The problem is cultural. We should not be naive and think that programmatic changes will bring us the solution. Quote, I just dropped my mouse because, like, where has this been? Please, more of that. More of that. Now, my real question is, why was this included in the Synod of Sin? Why? How many times in life growing up were you told, or have you told your own children, that we should not that we should be careful who we dialogue with, basically, the people we spend our time with? How many times? How many times were you told, maybe if you're a convert like I am, you were in an RCIA or you're going through a traditional parish's version of of their own way of coming into the church. And one of the things the priest told you was essentially garbage in, garbage out. You have to be careful what you put into your head, right? That includes a lot of how you spend your time. With that caveat, why was the Synod spending so much time and, frankly, church treasure on this subject? There was no point. The decision on that was already made, rightfully so. It didn't even need to be answered by John Paul II, but he chose to do so anyway, and he probably needed to, honestly, even though I just said he didn't, because it was being pushed hard in the 90s and it's being pushed hard now. He closed the door on it then. Francis reiterated it and has reiterated it several times. Now, one of the reasons I find this so funny is because if you look at this, there are a lot of reactions. And again, I can't put the words on the screen because I'm live. I'm not doing this pre-recorded with editing and things. But you see a lot of reactions to this already, and this was announced late last night. A lot of the reactions include, oh, the church is frozen in time and needs to get with the times. Oh, well, it's a good thing I don't, go there. I go to some other place that's actually truly preaches the gospel and other stuff. Go back and read St. Paul's first letter to Timothy, chapter 2, verses 7 to 15. Just read that. It's all you have to do. Okay, it's very clear. It just is. The problem we have in the church right now is that the hierarchs have imbibed of the philosophies of the world. Not just Kantian ethics, which was a problem back in the 80s, even all the way up to the papacy, but before that, they've imbibed of the philosophies of the world, the political notions of the world, and their values. And that's why we have gotten away from the concept of complementarity. It's so ridiculous. And I'm quite happy with this. Somebody saw some. Have I noticed some momentum around the book Kredo? Yeah, I have. I'm going to do a video next week talking about involving an interview Bishop Schneider gave about that, and he talks about why he wrote the book. If you're not familiar with Kredo, he published a catechism that's a synthesis of pretty much every catechism. It included a lot of corrections to the current catechism, because guess what? The current catechism of the Catholic Church, the one published in the 1990s and changed now once and soon to be twice by Francis, was said by the bishops who put it together for John Paul II that the thing actually was not good and needed to be fixed. It just never has been. But there's a lot of momentum going around that book, and I'm very happy to see it. Good morning to those saying good morning to me. Manila, Australia, checking in, Ireland. So yeah, I'm very happy with that. As Catherine says in the chat, watch out for the man enticing you with sweets and an invitation to see some puppies. And this is where I get to my other point on this. by bringing this into the synod, Francis opened Pandora's box. And I'm going to reiterate that in a video that I've recorded this morning. I'll probably finish editing, but I may hold off uploading it just to see, because the final document for this phase of the synod is issued Saturday night. And I will cover it probably Sunday morning in some depth, and then a video on Monday morning going over more. But he opened Pandora's box because they gave an official church audience, a church forum for this kind of discussion. And there were a lot of bishops there and a lot of cardinals participating who agreed with not with Francis's position, the church's position, but there were bishops there who were saying they really hope that this happens. That's a problem. Now, it could be that this will work in the next conclave to make sure those cardinals who took that position will have their chances just eliminated in the next conclave of becoming the Pope. But who knows? Because it can be worse than Francis. I know you have a hard time with that, and a lot of his problems that people have are not just ambiguities, but personality. Imagine if we got someone who had all of his theological problems and his administrative problems, but was extremely charismatic and a good communicator. Imagine what that situation would look like. Joe Blog says, not an issue of equality. And in my humble opinion, we have been brainwashed since Rousseau to look at roles as jobs. And that's very true. That's very true. And you see this all through society, not just in the employment either. You see this in entertainment field. You see this in the family. You see this everything. There's no place in society where this thinking hasn't found its way, and including, especially now, the church. Steve, word of caution from Steve, and I agree. Let's hope this isn't a little gift to Catholics, and that the Skittles subject will go the other direction. That could be why there was so much time spent on it. And that is my other point on this. Francis has been signaling from the beginning of the synod, before the synod. This last June, I did a video about how he gave a letter to Pastor Jimmy Martin saying, keep up the good work. Summer before, in 2022, I did a video like that because he did it that time too. Those letters were published on I think it's the Outreach website, one of James Martin's organizations. He met with New Ways Ministries foundress. Photo opportunity, told her to keep up the good work. That made waves, and that happened during the synod. My suspicion is you're going to get movement on that issue more than anything else, especially since Francis said he wants to table this discussion from this synod issue this synod meeting to next October's, which is the final meeting, where they were going to come up with something. So they're going to release their document for this phase Saturday night. My suspicion is it's going to be a hot mess. A lot of it will sound fine. You'll probably get the Francis's position on ordination reiterated, but it's going to be a vapid document, except it's apparently 40 pages long, so I can't read the thing. I'm not going to make a 2-hour video. I get people complaining that 12-minute videos are too long for some people, enough that I'm not going to, do that. Is this bait and switch? Possibly on the James Martin issue. Yes, it could be. Because I think which issue do you think our secular authorities who put a lot of pressure on the church care more about? Or the ins and outs of ordination, or the James Martin sin? Which one do you think they care more about? My money's on the latter. Raven Ray, also another word of caution. The problem I have with Francis is that he speaks from both corners of his mouth, which makes it difficult for his most fervent supporters to separate the wheat from the chaff. Yeah, and that's why you should watch my video that's going live in about half an hour. Because he did something really evil earlier this week. And the Pope's splainers are going to have to engage in the most entertaining form of mental gymnastics to justify what he did. And that's going live in half an hour. Those of you watching the replay, if you haven't watched that video yet, please watch that one. And then pray for everybody involved. It's bad. Good morning to everyone. Wishing good morning again. Robert says he hates it when the people involved try to use St. Joan of Arc's name in their twisted. Oh, yeah, no, I'm with you. St. Joan of Arc, St. Francis of Assisi, and others. I really hate when they invoke any of the saints. They've rebranded some, apostolic era saints as being somehow the patrons of their movement. Catherine says, check the footnotes. Exactly. Always. Amoris Laetitia taught us to read footnotes, papal footnotes. Has the Synod of Doom concluded? It will Saturday night. They're issuing their document for the end of this phase of the Synod Saturday night. And I'll do a live stream. What will be Saturday for those of you on the West Coast? Probably it'll be, technically it'll be Sunday. 2:30 in the morning. They're middle of the night live streams I do, because I always wake up in the middle of the night. I just do. So I'll do a live stream that you can listen to on your way to or from Mass prayer, and so you can check out what the things will be, and I will go over some of the fundamentals of the synodal document. And let's see, I had one more thing I wanted to mention in this. There were, in terms of reactions, there was, one person does rightly ask why people were encouraged to discuss this at the synod, and I mentioned that. But another reaction I found useful, many of you are going to agree with this, and I don't like how they called it. They called it the Francis Rosary, and that's not a comparison I would ever make. I would describe it differently. But otherwise, the comment might really be accurate. Here it is. I'm going to just verbatim quote it. This is the Francis Rosary. Every time he trucks out some blockbuster modernist agenda, he runs out on the street and says a rosary so people sigh and say, oh, good, he's still Catholic. It's a dodge. He knows all male priesthood will never survive synodal confusion. He might be right about that. That commenter may be right, because this subject has come up in every synod Francis has run. He runs them every 2 years. This synod on synodality is weird. It is ecumenical council in its length. But the synod on the family, the Fratelli Tutti synod, whatever, the Amazon synod, those synods, this came up over and over again, and it's going to come up at the next one, whatever that is. Francis will issue his document following up the synod on synodality in 2024 or 2025. I expect a 2026 synod will be announced soon. And you're going to have, yes, a lot of this. A lot of bishops are going to hold post-synod town halls. You're just going to see that. A traditionalist Catholic says they've gotten the sense that this phase of the synod is floating ideas and seeing what traction it gets. That's true. Probably true. Again, sorry that, people say, well, you sound very cynical. Sorry. I'm paying close attention to what they say, especially Francis says, and how he waffles all over the board on things has made me not trust him. There is one thing that I will say also that he does that is totally on point, and he has called for people today to do prayer and fasting for peace because of everything going on, but for peace, regardless of what you think of any side in any of these conflicts, there's multiple of them going and the world is teetering towards catastrophe at this point. He's calling for people to pray and fast, and that is a legitimate request. Whether you think he's the Pope or not, that's a legitimate request. And so I'm just reminding you. And for those who don't necessarily agree, well, I will tell you right now, that request was reiterated on Twitter by Bishop Strickland. He 100% agreed with him and asked for people to pray and fast today. So if you can do so, go look at the church's guidelines on praying and fasting. I would maybe use some older guidelines for that, though. They're, 2 collations and a small meal really aren't fasting by any normal sense of the word. But this is time for questions if you've got them. If you got any questions in the chat, now is the time. I've addressed some as they came. But I do believe this is not the last we've heard of this. We are going to hear this topic brought up again and again and again and again. I remember with the Pan Amazon Synod, that's the synod that had the Pachamama debacle. After that, during that synod, everybody expected some statement pro-ordination expansion happening, and it didn't happen then. And I expect we're going to keep seeing this brought up. And if we get somebody worse than what we have now, it's going to keep continuing. Edwin says, good morning. Or evening. Well, morning for me. Yeah, it's 4:30 in the morning where I'm sitting. I'm not sure where you are, what time it is, but he said good evening. I'm guessing Australia. Can this view change by October 2024? Maybe people will work on it. Maybe they'll come up with some new theological grounds for it, but I doubt it. The deaconesses in the ancient church really were basically nuns. And the tradition of having consecrated religious women goes back to the Old Covenant. Those who are familiar with my expositions on Blessed Aunt Catherine Emmerich speaks about this a lot with Our Lady, that she was consecrated religious. What is my take on the Chesterton Belloc duo? I love their writing. Don't have to agree with everything they say, but I love their writing. That's why it used to be that I had a picture of Belloc with sunglasses. It's still my channel logo that I used to talk behind. Chesterton and Belloc are great writers. They get a bad rap from people who really, usually the same kind of people who try to defend everything Francis says. Modernist Pope splinters have been shrieking and trazing beginning ground. Any take on it? I'm like, yeah, don't let it get to your head. there is, one thing we need to remember is to be normal, and I mean normal in the grand scheme of things, including, the long arc of human history. Let's not turn being a traditional Catholic into a LARP. We're otherwise we're just going to chase people away. It really is. This is why, I tend to, I follow Tim Gordon on Twitter, and I don't agree with everything he says, but he's also probably one of the most normal people in the whatever you want to call the sphere of Twitter. The broader sphere of Catholic commentary is people trying to be normal. It's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as normal doesn't mean accepting sin and becoming lukewarm and indifferent to the evils in the world. Benedict Aurelius says, this is right out of the Modernist Playbook, covering your heresies in a bed of orthodoxy. I think that's why I say keep watching what's going to happen on the James Martin sin. That's where everything's going to go. In what way did he crush their hopes? He told them, you're probably joining us late if you're asking. I suggest watching from the beginning. He basically closed the door on the ordination question to them. He said no. Again, no on deaconettes, no on priestesses, no on bishopettes, all of it closed. Doors closed. Again, not the first time he's done this, but at, the waning days of the synod, a new thing comes out. An interview he did comes out, and it just closes the door on it. Especially since the synod can't override him, and they are shrieking online, and it's going to get better in the days coming and going. Nothing good will come from any synod of Catholic bishops until we see the word anathema used again repeatedly. Yes, that is a word that has fallen out of our lexicon, and I'm really sad to see it. I wish we had more of it, but you know how it goes. So I'm curious, though, what you tend to think about this. So if you are watching this late, let me know in comments. I've got a video going live in about 25 minutes. Tune in for that if you can. It's going to be on something on the total opposite end of things that Francis did. Rajat, maybe I'll go check out what he had to say. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today, folks. Y'all have a nice day. And remember Francis's call that is totally legitimate for people for praying and fasting, given the events going on. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. God bless.